I'm joined today by Veselin Pizurica, who's the Chief Operating Officer and founder of Waylay. Welcome to the show, Veselin. Great to see you again.
Thank you, and good morning, and thanks for having me.
Indeed, and for our audience, you're on one side of the planet, I'm on the other. I'm here on Asia Pacific, and you're in Europe. I wonder if we could maybe just start with a little bit of background on you. I mean, our audience probably doesn't know you as well as I do. Could you maybe start us off with giving our audience a brief introduction to you and your background, a bit of a get to know you, as it were?
Yeah, so first of all, I am here in Belgium, in the beautiful city of Ghent, and I arrived in Belgium about 25 years ago. I am engineer by education. I studied in Serbia at that time, and I work at university, and then I got a grant, PhD grant in Brussels, and hence, ever since I stayed here in Belgium, I stayed in academia for about 4 or 5 years, mostly focusing on data mining and artificial intelligence. At the time it was not so cool, so I was wondering what I'm going to do after that. I work on the data fusion and sensor fusion problems. Then I joined Alcatel, where I worked in particularly in domain of the troubleshooting systems and control theory. That's actually very close to my heart. I have about a dozen of patents in that domain. And somewhere like around 2010, 11, I joined 4 or 5 different startups, particularly in domain of the cloud compute. And hence, about 10 years ago, I decided to, if you like, take all that experience I had with me and co-founded the company back in, it was 2014. Yeah, that's a little bit about myself and the company.
That's an amazing background. With all that in mind, what's a day in the life of Veselin like currently in your role as both founder and chief operating officer, working with your team at Waylay and your partners and customers?
Yeah, I think my role, first of all, as a founder, you always do all sorts of things, and this has not changed from day one. Having said it, over time, I kind of shifted from a very technical role as a CTO to very much being focused on growing the company and scaling the company. Hence, my job and my responsibilities, if you like, shifted more into the operations and making Waylay a success. In the, let's say, in the previous life, if you like, with the company, I was mostly focusing on technology and crafting the platform that we have today.
Right. When I was going through your website, when we were talking last week, and I was doing some homework for our conversation today, going through your website, a couple of really key things jumped out, and I'm just going to bullet point them now for our audience, and then maybe we can dive into some one by one. There are a couple of things like, democratizing data insights and low code automation, liberating natural human intelligence and enabling value creation by making artificial intelligence, information technology, and operational technology data accessible to everyone. I wonder if we can walk through each of those key things and specifically in the context of the Waylay offering. Let's start with what democratizing data insights for all actually means from Waylay's point of view.
Yeah, I think from if you like, from my point of view, rather than Waylay first, it's that one of the things that I was always intrigued. It's how hard it's for humans to, if you like, abstract their intent, what they actually want machines to do, and how hard it actually to implement and make it operational. And obviously, over the past 10 years, we have been hearing about machine learning and AI. But what you observe in practice that often in practice you have very disjoint departments which are only busy with that stuff. And once they have the algorithms, which is then very hard to actually make them applicable and actually implement it in real life. So for me, if you like, the automation and in the stat context also machine learning and AI, it's all in relation to making it operational, making it actually available to business. And somehow still, even to these days, these worlds are pretty different, and hence there is a lot of frustration in the enterprise community how to actually bring these two worlds together. And from day one, if you like, my mission was, and obviously of the company, is to actually bring these worlds together of automation and machine learning in context of real use cases that everybody can benefit from.
And I imagine a lot of your customers, in the context of the democratization of all of this, they will come to you and their core business may be, say, transport or logistics or finance or banking or education. That's their core business, and they're not in the software development. They're not really in the data science or AI domain. And so is it the case that when we think about the democratization of this capability, that organizations come to you and saying, we have these subject matter experts, so they're specialists in their domain, but they aren't specialists in Waylay's domain. Can you help us integrate that and take their domain expertise with 20, 30 years of experience and leverage that to figure out what's in our data, what's in our infrastructure. Is that sort of the type of thing that people come to you for?
Yes, exactly. I mean, they come typically. So there are two ways to think about Waylay, and two ways the journeys of people who discover Waylay. One of these are typically system architects and VP engineering who understand the problem space we are solving. And obviously, there is another side of things through the business and sales contact we have, that people understand the value that we bring from, if you like, from top down. But in essence, both of these worlds are looking at something that can implement at speed and which can actually bring the value as fast as possible. So I would say that we are not radically changing the problem space. It's rather the speed and the way we actually implement these use cases that makes a difference. So I would
Indeed.
say, you can take a car example. You can every car can get you from A to B, but I think what is interesting is how fast you can deliver something that really brings the value and immediate benefits for the customer, which really then brings them to our platform and to the very first conversations. And from then onwards, what we often do is that rather than staying at the level of slides of demos, we are very robust in a way. We are trying to, if you like, pitch ourselves by saying, give us the hardest problem you have and give us a couple of days or weeks, not months, to deliver very first implementation has to prove what we are basically saying or actually trying to claim on our website.
Indeed, and talking to your CEO associate Leonard Donnelly yesterday, he was talking about your goal is to bring 80% benefit to the client very, very quickly to then get to the core business. And hearing what you're saying there, a lot of senior executives up to board level CEOs are telling us that the two things they're really concerned about now, given the geopolitical situation around the world, supply chain issues, and certainly the economic impact the world's enduring, is that they are under a lot of pressure to get return on either get to market, so reduce time to market, or return on investment. And you were just talking there, not only helping your customers, but invariably then helping your customers' customers. With all of that in mind, when we think about some of the key points on your website, and it talks about low-code automation, with what you've just been talking about, it's not something that everyone in an audience would be overly familiar with. How do you describe the concept of low-code automation, and particularly in the complex level of orchestration that Waylay can offer?
Cool. I think it's a good question, and it's very hard in a couple of minutes to describe it. But let me try that. And sorry, I'm a technical guy, so I might get a little bit.
Go as technical as you like.
Yeah, sure. So I try not to stay too deep, but I think if you look through the history, people try to make machines to do stuff. And I'm not going to talk about punch cards, but let's start with the very first assembly and compilers and program languages. So, and every program language, it's so-called Turing complete. I mean, people know Turing for other things, but one of the things that Turing complete language means is that whatever you can think of, you can describe and implement in the language. So obviously then the next thing that people have been wondering, can we bring that abstraction layer even higher, such that people can actually make an automation even simpler, so they don't need to actually do a lot of coding. And low code does not mean that you do not know anything about particular problem space or that you don't know the code, but you actually write just small snippets of code, and eventually that layer on top of that should then do the automation, not necessarily in the language itself. And hence my always fascination with the automation technologies. And that's how actually we have started the company, by trying to bring one automation layer above the programming languages. Hence, we can actually then layer that with the low code, such that automation intent, it's actually implemented in the proper way. Now, everybody can say, well, it's very abstract, but let me just give you a very simple example that everybody can relate to. If you tell Alexa, what's the weather here? Obviously, you have an intent, you have an action, and that device is answering you back. It's a very simple thing to implement. But in the real life, especially when we talk about bigger machines, it goes a little bit broader than that. You can have a different environments, different inputs. You have to fuse all this information, giving that and that, and that and that, or that and that, do these things. And it's very natural to humans to describe these intents, but it's often very hard to implement beyond in the programming language. So if you like, we have bring the kind of automation layer, which is very natural to the way people describe the problem, and hence the complexity of the problems we can solve, it's it's very easy and faster than it would do if you do it in a programming language. And that's what we mean by low code and automation for a complex environments. When things are easy, everybody can do that. When things are getting a little bit more complicated and which go beyond trivia, and this is often what happens in on manufacturing floor, or when you basically do, all sorts of different automations in telco domain or in the finance, things are getting a little bit more complicated. So what you want to actually empower your teams with small snippets of code to get immediately value for what their actually their intent is.
Yes, it's often the conundrum, isn't it, that the simpler it sounds, the more complex it probably is underneath.
Exactly. So I mean, that's actually one of the stuff which is very interesting. We have a patent on our technology. Doesn't mean it's probably the best one, but it's a very innovative way of thinking about the problem in that space.
What can you tell us about the way that Waylay makes artificial intelligence and IT and OT data accessible to everyone? We looked at some of your demos last week, and I was fascinated by the way that which you can start at the high level, which you just outlined then, but also then get all the way down to effectively talking to your own Gen I GPT style tool in plain English to get insights. Just that whole topic of making AI and IT and OT data accessible to everyone. Walk us through kind of what that means and how Waylay goes about it, and maybe some examples of how customers are putting it into practice to improve their business.
Yeah. So first of all, there are things which are unavoidable. They are complicated because by nature they are really complicated and complex, and it's really in relation to OT and IT world. And this is something that is you cannot trivialize the problem. So there is something we call a data ingestion layer, which enables us to basically bridge different protocols and all sorts of things. I'm not going to bore you into that part, but this is something which is given that everybody has to solve. Once the data one or the other way arrives in our system, then it becomes, if you like, a game of bringing all these inputs and bringing the use cases on top of that. So that's the part that will actually shine. And because of the complexity of the OT side of things, we have a lot of data ingestion layers, which enables us to tap to all sorts of different platforms. Now, the things have, on that side of things, slightly consolidated compared to a couple of years ago. We had probably 500 platforms. Now we have few of these. So hence, it's also our problem a little bit easier, making a right selection of the already existing platforms which are out there. There is a difference compared to 10 years ago. Assets are getting connected one or the other way. So that problem is getting solved. But again, having that data operationalized and being able to use them in context of automation and AI, it's the problem we are solving. And I can maybe speak later in relation to the NLP, but before that, again, just to bring to some really easy use case examples, I can disclose that this is not a problem. Like our customers, like ACO in US, they have a connected harvesters, tractors. They are actually having the data already connected. But then from then onwards, how to actually are able to monitor these systems, to do the preventive and predictive analysis of the data, and then connect it to the field force and after sales support. It's a big deal. And this is actually where we shine with our automation technology.
It reminds me of a famous quote by the author Arthur C. Clarke that a sufficiently advanced technology is often indistinguishable from magic.
Exactly. Indeed.
Now, we were speaking...
Another way around, when you see the technology with 10 years old, like, oh, what's this thing? It doesn't look that cool anymore. Anyhow, but indeed, it sounds a little bit like a magic. And I mean, we'll come back to that. I mean, people are now getting familiar with ChatGPT sort of technology, which we did look and very much like magic, and are very interesting topics that we're working in that relation as well.
Yeah, in fact, just to touch on one other thing you mentioned, when we're talking about NLP or natural language processing, your demo last week really impressed me in that not only could you do historical analysis on data and logs and events, you could do it in real time in the stream, and then potentially do some predictive elements that you could consider what risks might be coming up. Maybe it's a temperature gauge or sensor that's increasing, about to hit a threshold. But what really impressed me is when you were talking in real time, both on the command line, and I'm sure you could do it through click buttons. You were talking to the platform, and you were talking to the data. Give us a little insight into that, because that when I got off our conversation last week, that blew my mind when I realized, wait, you were talking to the platform, you were talking to the data, and it was coming back in real time in plain language and made sense. And it was like, wait, that decision making isn't everywhere. That's something very unique to Waylay.
The way I try to explain that, it's I will try to make an analogy, and don't get me wrong, it's going to be a little bit of a kind of almost like a military
That's
analogy.
okay.
If you talk to someone and you want to absolutely be sure the guy understood your intent, you say Roger that.
Yeah.
And I like to understand and think about our technology as Roger that for things. Why is that interesting? Because you would like to tell a machine your intent, do these things. The last thing you want, that machine to Roger that your intent in your language and the way you have described it. No, you want that machine to look at what it is doing, describe that back to you in your language, but rather than relaying your command, it has to understand what that command is all about and figure out from the intent that is actually doing, relaying back, and then you're only then sure that what your intent was through the language is exactly what the machine is doing. And this is, something that it goes a little bit beyond what there is a guy, Andrei Karpathy, he's a famous guy, and he was director of AI in Tesla and co-founder of OpenAI. He famously, he said a couple of days ago that English is becoming a new programming language. And we are saying a little bit slightly different thing. The English is becoming the language of automation. Again, coming back to my first analogy that we are trying to actually do something on top of the programming languages. We are not trying from language to create small code snippets, which you then still have to do in your desired language. We are trying to make the intent as the automation intent, and hence for us is easier than to distill that as the automation intent towards the machines. Similarly, then when we're asking the machines for the data or what is actually doing, it can actually relay that back because it's actually in a way abstracted through the automation layer of our technology. The second thing that, if I may, I mean, we are diverging a little bit from the topic or the question. It's that because our technology is explainable, and because our technology is designed in a way people naturally think about automation, it's less ambiguous. Ambiguous in the sense that we often have a little bit of fear using of ChatGPT, not necessarily because it's going to get our jobs, but because we're not 100% sure whether the thing understood what our intent is. But if you train the ChatGPT-like technologies, not necessarily OpenAI, but it might be Llama or other open source foundation models, with the proper models of the intents and the outcomes, then there is no ambiguity in intent you are actually trying to explain to a machine. And it's actually a very interesting domain that we are working on right now.
It is, and it's a very exciting time as well. And when you mentioned I guess the adoption of English as a programming language, it reminded me of when at high school we were all told to learn BASIC because it was just easy to explain and most people could understand it and grasp it within seconds and then start to do things. And I think I see us being at a tipping point now that we're going to be building models to understand the structure of the language, such as English, that we're feeding it in, and models to then train on the relevant, vertical sector, whether it's finance or transport, whatever. And the line between them is going to become very, very blurry. But what I did like about your demonstration the other day was it gave me a very real sense that you had a very clear understanding of what you'd applied the models to, the data sets and the environments, and that there was less of that black box unknown magic that we just hope we roll the dice and it works, versus a much more supervised, controlled environment where, and I think given the nature of what you do, needs to be the case necessarily, so to remove potential risk, or even remove that nonsense concept of hallucination that people have created as a term to describe it made a mistake. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this advances, and we will definitely have you back as we go through these details and talk more in length. But you reminded me as well with some of this infrastructure, telecommunications is the big part you work in, and I know you've got a big global business partner you work with in that space. And last week when we were talking, you mentioned that Waylay is going to be taking part in GSMA's annual event in Barcelona, Mobile World Congress. I wonder if you could maybe tell us about what folk can look forward to from Waylay and the team there at Mobile Congress in Barcelona.
Since this is obviously primarily a telco event. We will be focusing the application of our technology in relation to this domain. So what we'll be showcasing, it's another way to look at to troubleshooting and the customer care and networking problems in relation to the network operation centers domain. So I will just try to briefly describe the use case and demo we'll be showcasing. Having said that, we'll also feature our, if you like, generative AI technology. Often the problem, and it's in a way describes a little bit problem of observability and explainability. In that sense, is that in context of the network domain, you have a lot of network elements, a lot of routing happening, and eventually what in a telco domain people would like to do is to deliver a new service, whether it's a streaming, whether it was in the past voice over IP and so forth. And one of the particular problems there is that as you are delivering new services, you have awful lot of network equipment from different vendors which are delivering parts of that, if you like, a component that is then expressed as a service on top of that. And what often happens is that you have, in reality, a lot of alarms that you have to correlate, and then you have to figure out which service might be impacted by what you're actually seeing there. So it's very hard sometimes to grasp from all sort of things what's actually happening as the impact on the service side of things. So what are we doing? We are doing slightly things differently. We are actually layering the service topology rather than a network topology. And then we are describing their services through the KPIs and quality of metrics. And then we can also do that through the voice as well. And once we've done that, then you basically get alarm, which is describing the service problem. You can actually then go one step further and say, okay, now, in a voice or a text or even visually say, okay, now that I have this service as a problem, describe me the root cause of that problem, because you really have to get to the explanatory part of that. Coming back to democratizing these things, you often have people who are not necessarily PhDs in telecommunications, but these people need to actually then figure out how to remedy that problem, which is something that obviously comes from our environment telling you, okay, this is a jitter problem or there is a latency problem. Okay, now that I know that, I have to figure out how to fix that. You can think of that again in the context of the connected vehicles. You might get an error code, but there must be somewhere a user manual or operational manual for that vendor how to eventually you need to go around that and fix that. And this is again where if you like, the NLP can help, because what often people do these days is trying to actually bring the documents and use them in order to actually have the guided remedy use scenarios having that problem described. So again, you can actually start mixing the real-time data and the problems that are figured out and found by Waylay, and then connect that to your user manuals or actually your operational guys that actually then can guide them through the means to actually remedy that problem. And that is what we're going to be featuring at the Mobile World Congress.
Fantastic. I love your car analogy because there's always a difference between the fuel light going on and the driver being able to just top up petrol or diesel versus the change oil light, which is book an appointment with a mechanic and get in a hoist and remove the sump to take the oil out and then flush it again. And it's the same user interface of the dashboard and the same little LEDs. And they're probably the same red or orange color, but very different outcome depending on expertise and domain of knowledge. Well, I'm sorry that I can't personally be there in Barcelona with you, but I know we got our colleague Bill Mew, who is coming down from the UK, and we'll be catching up with both yourself and Leonard and getting to know the team and hopefully getting you on camera. I wonder, one of the things that I love to do with my guests is to kind of look at a little bit of crystal ball gazing, and we won't hold your feet to the fire in this, but your role, as many roles like yours do, affords you a really unique lens through which you see the world. I wonder if you could share some of the key trends that you're seeing come over the horizon in the next 12 to 18 months that your peer COOs and other senior executives should be discussing with their teams, and particularly in the boardroom. What should they be preparing for, and some of the things that you at Waylay can then help them with?
I think that, it really, first of all, depends from industry to industry. There is a lot of disruption naturally happening through the globalization, and there is always a huge competition among bigger players to stay at the top of the game. And applications like ours can help them to speed their decision process. Now, When it comes to technology, I think there is a lot of things happening, obviously, in context of generative AI. And there is a lot of things that, on one hand, you have to manage expectation, and also on the other hand, you have to look beyond that noise, if you like, and see what are the possibilities this technology can bring in really short to near term. And there is obviously already things that are happening, being disrupted in context of, let's say, the marketing or the art. I mean, just not to again go to yet another thing. I'm very hard sometimes to keep my line, but it's almost like things like, in the past we thought that boring jobs will be delegated to computers and will do the fun stuff. It turns out to be other way around. Fun stuff, it's something that, computers are getting better and better at. And this is very interesting in domain of what we are doing. It's like coming back to the, NLPs. They are bringing a huge amount of value already in relation to summarizing the knowledge, if you like. And this is something that I see already a lot of companies doing, bringing chatbots or something that can provide a guided knowledge consolidation of things that are already in there. Where I'm actually interested in, it's in domain of using the language, which is it's very fluid. It's very, humans are very funny. They can do and say things in many different ways. We always get what we mean by that. And what I like about the NLP, it actually allows you to kind of consolidate different languages into kind of universal language that machines understand. That is to say, I can say something in English and have a very easy reply on my intent in Chinese, for instance. And I think this is something that people should be looking at in the coming years. I would say manage your expectation in context what the existing technology can do. Don't spend way too much money on ideation projects, because there is a lot of fuzz around it. Manage your expectations what the NLP technologies can do in domain of the knowledge consolidations. But I think what is probably more interesting in a mid to long term, it's something in the domain of automation. Because coming back to the origin of, or let's say, at the beginning of our conversation, what we mean by democratizing the AI, it's actually democratizing or lowering the bar of intelligent people being able to use technology in day-to-day work. And this is really something which I really am very very fascinating from early ages, because for one or the other reason, technologies have over the past 2-3 decades have become a boys' job thing. Boys were doing one thing, and girls that are actually, also very, very eager to learn. They were just kind of, shying away from technology because very too complicated. It's a lot of stuff that needs to happen before I actually can see things happening. With the lowering the bar of this technology, we can in a way bring that domain expertise and experience and curiosity bring to everybody. And in that sense, I would like to say to the people who are on my side of things, look at the realm of possibilities. There is a lot of things happening in different verticals and markets, and the speed, it's paramount. What used to happen in years or a month is literally now happening in days. Sometimes it's very hard to catch up with all these things. So it's a very tiring job, and people have to find the right mindset, the right way of thinking about where is all that going and how to adapt as things go, And you will see, I mean, I have my brother who works in the automotive industry. Things are going there really, really berserk these days. There is a lot of things happening because, I mean, if you do not watch out, I mean, especially in let's say in Germany, you might be in a year or two overrun by someone else. So this can happen pretty quickly in different domains. I'm not trying to scare people, but people should be well aware that investing in technology, investing in the knowledge, investing in having the stuff with the right mindset, it's the only way to survive in the long run.
There's some great advice there, and two key points really jump out at me from what you're talking about, particularly the idea that we used to chase the exciting jobs, and now often we can be trapped in the boring jobs. I had some fun anecdotes with a friend who was talking about the history of compiling dictionaries and years of work understanding words and languages and then putting them together in a book and publishing it. And yet now we can use a GPT to just create a dictionary. But what we actually need to know is the expertise as the humans to go and validate what it's created to make sure we're not publishing fake things. So it's sort of gone full circle that now it doesn't take us 8 years to compile a dictionary. It takes 8 seconds, but we still need people with the time to go and review that. And the other one that really jumped out, given the transport and the analogy meant, was tour operators, where, you know, humans would once upon a time walk you around the city and show you the city and their life experience. Now we all put a little earphone in our head and walk around with an app and chase our phones. And yet those people that used to take you on tour are now the ones that have to validate the tours and check and create the journey. They just aren't the ones doing the foot traffic. So the job hasn't gone away. It's just changed. And I did like your whole thought there around, you know, keep your eye on this thing. It is going to move very fast. It is going to change. But the thing that really assures me is yourself and your team there at Waylay are there for people to reach out to now and have those conversations sooner than later and ensure that they are the ones that are leading that change as opposed to allowing it to happen to them.
Yeah, and absolutely. So I really invite people to, you know, reach out to us through the LinkedIn or the website. I mean, we are not the company, with all respect to companies who are selling visions, and this is also a very important part of it. We are actually delivering on these promises, and we are not there to entertain ideation apartments, so to speak, but really to show in the realm of the existing technology what is possible, how you can improve existing line of businesses. So definitely, I'm you know, eager to, you know, prove by doing things rather than just saying entertaining conversation, which is also very important to actually, you know, bringing the real problem and that customers have to see how the existing technologies and some really latest things that we're working on can improve their line of business.
Well, Veselin, I really appreciate your time. It's been fantastic to catch up with you again, and I love all those insights you've shared with our audience. And we will make sure that wherever people see this video or see any of the content related to it, we'll have links to your website, links to your corporate social profiles on the likes of Twitter and LinkedIn and so forth, and make it very easy for them to reach out. And just to wrap up, I would like to invite our audience to reach out sooner than later to talk to Waylay and the team across the board, whether it's Waylay directly, their partners and their ecosystem resellers and integrators, and have that conversation sooner than later. Even if you only have one question, that may open the door up to a whole range of things, because some of the subject matter experts, such as Veselin here today, and your associates, and particularly Leonard, yesterday we spoke to, these conversations should be happening now at board level and down within organizations, in my view, as you said, because these changes are happening so fast and they are so broad and so deep that they are going to catch us out if we aren't part of that conversation and we don't develop a language and a vocab with which to discuss it. And then you may just end up with an economic challenge of being left behind. But Veselin, we will definitely have you back on the show again many times to talk about some of these in more detail. But thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and to have a really great show at MWC, and maybe we'll catch up with you after that again.
All right. Thank you very much. And again, appreciate it, and have a good day.
Absolutely. Okay. Take care. Yes. Safe travels.
Take care. Bye.